Breastfeeding rates sharply declined post-World War II due to the development of safe artificial human milk substitutes and the aggressive marketing of these products. Before safe substitutes, infants were most commonly fed cow's milk because of its availability and low cost. Every mammal has its own distinct milk, with specific quantities of nutrients and components such as fat and proteins. This milk is unique to each species.
Go.
This chart shows the differences between cow's milk and human milk. As you can see, cow's milk has 4 times as much protein as human milk. Also, cow's milk does not contain the correct amino acids needed for a human infant's growing brain. It also contains too much saturated fat and far too much sodium and calcium. Not only did these differences make cow's milk hard to digest, but it was also nutritionally deficient. Another popular method used was the use of a wet nurse. A wet nurse was somebody hired to feed an infant. However, only the wealthy could afford this. Wet nurses lost popularity at the end of the 19th century due to the fear of the spread of syphilis. In the late 1800s, the U.S. infant mortality rate skyrocketed. In 1897, 18% of Chicago's infants died before their first birthday. 53% of these deaths were due to diarrhea from infants being fed spoiled milk. National campaigns are introduced urging mothers to breastfeed and for milk to be pasteurized and come from healthy cows. Developing safe substitutes soon became a large business. Condensed milk and evaporated milk became very popular as infant formulas because they did not require refrigeration and they were also heavily advertised. However, it was soon found that they caused scurvy and rickets. When these substitutes came on the market, there was significant collaboration between doctors and manufacturers. Doctors were paid by them to recommend formula, so it gained medical legitimacy, and parents were made to believe that formula was just as good as breastfeed or even better. With this and aggressive marketing through billboards, television, radio, and milk nurses, who were nurses hired to visit women in hospitals and sell them formula, bottle feeding soon became the norm. By the end of World War II, breastfeeding rates had declined by half. The formula companies soon tried to make it the norm in developing countries as well. It was seen as a form of modernization, and breastfeeding came to be associated with the poor. As formula sales soared in these countries, so did the rates of malnutrition and infant deaths. Many of the women encouraged to breastfeed could not afford formula and did not have access to clean water. They were left with no choice but to dilute the formula, and they often mixed it with filthy water, which led to malnourishment and disease. The correlation between bottle feeding and malnutrition soon became apparent. This issue received worldwide attention, and some formula companies agreed to stop. However, Nestle, the world leader in formula sales, did not. In 1977, a boycott against Nestle was initiated and soon took hold in the United States and Europe. A congressional hearing was held in 1978 on the promotion and use of formula in developing countries. UNICEF, the United Nations International Children's Education Fund, and the WHO, the World Health Organization, held a meeting in 1979 to try to address the problem. They developed the UNICEF-WHO International Code of Breast Milk Substitutes. This code basically did not allow any advertising by formula companies at all. Even after development of the code, Nestle did little to change its tactics. Finally, in 1984, Nestle signed an agreement to follow the code. Breastfeeding in the U.S. regained popularity in the 1970s due to the feminist-inspired women's health movement. From 1970 to 1980, the initiation rate increased from 26.5% to 55.3%. The initiation rate is defined as 1 month of breastfeeding. The rate continued to rise and then suddenly dropped 10% in 1990. This drop is associated with Nestle's violation of the WHO code, who in 1989 began advertising in magazines and in television. New health benefits of breastfeeding are discovered every day. Breastfed infants are known to suffer from less allergies, asthma, diabetes, obesity, and infectious illness than those who are formula fed. Some studies even suggest that they have higher IQs. Mothers who breastfeed shed their pregnancy weight sooner and have lower incidences of osteoporosis and breast and ovarian cancers. Breast milk can never be replicated. It is full of live antibodies and is adaptable and changes throughout the infant's development and to meet its changing needs. There are also environmental benefits to breastfeeding. Formula manufacturers produce millions of pounds of packaging material which later end up in landfills, while breastfeeding produces none. The average cost of formula is $1,500 per year, while breastfeeding is free. Through WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, a federal supplemental nutrition program designed to help low-income women, the U.S. government purchases more than half of the U.S.'s supply of formula and distributes it free to its participants. In the book Milk, Money, and Madness, the author states that if every WIC participant decided to breastfeed, it would save over $500 million per year in federal funds, and that doesn't account for that children would be healthier, translating to significant indirect savings. Today, most doctors recommend breastfeeding over formula, but it is still believed that the way a physician was fed or the way a physician fed its infants highly influences their recommendations. Formula companies, with their sneaky tactics, are aware of this and then offer doctors and nurses a year's supply of free formula. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months and at least up to 12 months, and then longer as usually desired by mother and infant. The World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months and then a minimum of 2 years and then more as mutually desired by mother and infant. Despite massive nationwide campaigns and recommendations, U.S. breastfeeding rates remain low in comparison to other developed nations. Although the initiation rate is up to 74%, according to the Center for Disease Control, fewer than 31% of women are still breastfeeding after 6 months, and only 11% after 12 months. The U.S. is only one of 4 countries in the entire world that does not offer paid maternity leave to mothers. This chart shows how the U.S. compares to other developed nations in regards to paid maternity leave. As you can see, France offers 16 weeks of paid maternity leave at 90%, Norway 18 weeks at 100%, and as you can see, the United States offers 0 weeks of paid maternity leave at 0% of earnings. This is a critical contributing factor to our low rates. Other challenges women face to breastfeeding are lack of accommodations in the workplace, no time or place to pump, continued aggressive marketing of formula, lack of support at hospitals, and the fact that America has become a bottle feeding culture. America has also sexualized the breast, and some view the breast as sexual and inappropriate, even dirty, when the breast's biological purpose is to nourish an infant. In an interview with my aunt who grew up in France, where the breast is not as sexualized, she stated that it's extremely common to see a breastfeeding woman in public. Breastfeeding rates sharply declined post-World War II due to the development of safe artificial human milk substitutes and the aggressive marketing of these products. Since then, scientists have discovered the vast advantages breastfeeding has over artificial feeding. Although these health discoveries have been made, the U.S. has been slow to change its practices and has one of the lowest initiation rates of the developed countries. Formula companies continue to violate UNICEF's WHO's International Code of Breast Milk Substitutes. UNICEF believes that if every child was exclusively breastfed from birth to 6 months, an estimated 1.3 million lives could be saved each year. Thank you.
Is breastfeeding considered indecent exposure in any state?
Actually, no. 29 states have changed their laws to exempt breastfeeding from indecent exposure statutes, and others have laws relating directly to breastfeeding, stating a woman is allowed to breastfeed her child wherever she is legally allowed to be.